Bună dimineața și bun găsit la BU, sunt Sabina Iosub și vă invit să rămâneți alături de mine în următoarea jumătate de oră pentru că o să discutăm despre inteligența artificială și lucrurile deosebite pe care le-a făcut Parlamentul European tocmai pentru a veni în întâmpinarea acestei noi idei și acestui nou fel de a trăi. O să vedeți exact la ce mă refer. Alături de mine la această oră este Dragoș Tudorache, e cel care a condus comisia care a creat până la urmă legislația. And also today here with me in the European Parliament in Strasbourg is Peter Vitanov. Thank you so much. You're from Bulgaria and you've been part of this discussion about artificial intelligence in this commission. I will start with the chair of this commission, with Dragoș Tudorache. We've started to discuss about this subject before the creation of the committee in the European Parliament. You were a first runner, let's say, in this area of artificial intelligence. Now, after this mandate, what have you achieved?
Well, I think the law itself stands as a testimony of the work that we have done together, and I'm happy that Peter is here with me because we've worked together on this legislation. And it was because we managed to work together and put away our differences and find the common ground on something that is so important, so transformational, as you said it yourself, for the way we're going to live, the way we're going to function in the new economy. And again, it's not only the AI Act itself, which is the first law of its kind in the world, but it's also what's going to happen now that the law is enacted. Because there will be new standards, there will be new benchmarks that will be created as a result of this law, and that will create, from my point of view, a new ecosystem for trustworthy AI that is going to be building out of Europe. And I think that's also an enormous opportunity in economical terms for the Union. There's always this dilemma between innovation and regulation, as if one could not do without the other or that one cancels the other. We believe, and we have worked in this legislation to make it that these are twin objectives, that you can actually ensure protection of our rights and of the interests of society, and at the same time create an environment for innovation. And I'm very much looking forward to see how that ecosystem, how that environment is going to grow over the coming years.
It is important to see how it develops in each member state, and we've seen a lot of discussions in Romania, and I know that there were also in Bulgaria about the danger that comes with the artificial intelligence, but also a huge help in some areas, and is an extremely fine line between the two of them.
Yes, that is true. But first, thank you for having me here. But to be honest, you have two guests. But on one hand, you have this German BMW. Sorry for the. And on the other hand, you have the Russian Lada. So you have the one who is Dragoș, who made it possible, because this law was based on the compromise between, on one hand, freedoms and security. On one hand, fostering the innovation in a way but also mitigating the possible risk and discrimination. So finding this team balance was really, I would say, a miracle. And Dragoș, this is Dragoș's role, because he managed to unite all the different stakeholders. And yes, it took us almost four and a half years. But yes, and to be honest, just a remark, no, there was not a huge debate in Bulgaria, unfortunately. Although we see the potential benefits of the artificial intelligence in many aspects, in many sectors, education, healthcare systems, so on. But at the same time, we also see certain risks. And I think that what we managed to achieve is to find this compromise between the innovations, try to foster them, but at the same time tackling all the risks. And we are having the people on top of these systems and technologies, and I think that we made it. And yeah, it is. He was absolutely right that it's a testimony. We see some of our remarks in different countries' draft proposal for certain legislation. So this is also a proof for our achievement.
One note for those who are watching us right now, the two MEPs are from different parties and they work together extremely well, different parties, different countries. That's how the legislation should be done, Dragoș Tudorache, at the European level. It doesn't matter from which party you are coming from which country you are coming from. In the middle of the discussion should be the citizen. And in this area, when constructing the legislation for artificial intelligence, I think, because I was covering this subject from day one, I think that you really managed. You both, you, the Commission, you, the European Parliament, managed to put the citizen and its needs, his or her needs and problems. There will be still, Dragoș Tudorache, a debate in each member state about how to implement this legislation.
True.
Are you afraid that the member states will do more harm than well?
Well, I'm not afraid, but I am concerned with how the implementation will be done. And to be honest, not only at member state level, because we do have a governance that is on two layers. One layer is at the European level, where we have a future AI office that is supposed to work hand in hand with the Commission, and it has some exclusive competence over the top tier models, the likes of Google and Microsoft and all the big players, but at the same time also has a responsibility to ensure coherence of implementation across the land, and it's very important. But as you rightly said, there is a huge challenge also at national level, and not only in member states like Romania, Bulgaria, but in all member states, because what is important for the future national regulators to understand is that what we wanted to do with this regulation, the spirit of this regulation, in this balance that also Petra was referring to between innovation and protection, this is something that will be up to them to actually put in practice. They have to understand the spirit of this law. They have to understand that they are not only going to be enforcers, only to go and punish companies or impose fines. Where necessary, of course, they'll have to do that to ensure that the protections are effective. But at the same time, they'll have to work to stimulate. They will have to guide. Right. Mm-hmm. They will have to facilitate the access of companies to sandboxes, for example, which are created specifically to help particular smaller and medium-sized enterprises, which we've given a free access to sandboxes, priority access to sandboxes. But again, it's going to be up to the regulators, to the national regulators, on how they understand that role and how they actually put in practice all of these tools to help SMEs, because that's the interest. The future of economy is going to be in technology. This is where the growth is going to come from. And if governments don't understand that it is also in their interest to stimulate that growth, to stimulate that uptake of AI and create the ecosystems in their member states to make it attractive for businesses to stay and create and innovate in their member states, then again, the underlying bet behind this regulation would be lost, and it would be a great pity. So we'll have to watch very carefully, and this is going to be a task for the future Parliament as well, to exercise very close scrutiny as to how the European level, but also the member states, are going to do enforcement to make sure that, again, we stay true to the objectives that we have set ourselves to achieve.
Are you sharing the same concern?
Well, especially coming from Bulgaria and from this region, yes, so we do share the same concern. But I'll tell you, I'm basically happy because we managed to achieve this balance. My biggest concern would be that we are losing this technological competition with United States of America, even with China. So with this law, we try, like I said in the beginning, we try to stimulate this innovation so that we make sure that the companies, the developers stay in Europe and not going back to the United States. So my biggest concern would be that to keep the competitiveness of the technological company in Europe.
We know that with the help of this piece of legislation, we will know more about what is made with the artificial intelligence, and I'm referring here at the labeling of the creation, let's say, of artificial intelligence. Will this help for real?
The labeling.
Yeah.
But of course, this piece of legislation will regulate some of those practices that they can cause harm. For instance, we managed to prohibit a lot of discriminative practices coming from one of the most democratic countries in the world. I'm not talking about the social scoring in China, but also about the predictive policing systems used in LAPD, for instance. So I do have, of course, some concern about the implementation about law enforcement, but I'm glad that at least we managed to mitigate those risks.
We will see like a stamp, let's say, on a video or on a photo that is made via the artificial intelligence. Maybe we'll hear something on a voice in order to understand that it was also done or modified with artificial intelligence. Will it be enough?
Well, we will know whether it's going to be enough once we start seeing the effects of the legislation. The legislation now demands from those that are creating the tools that make these sort of what we call deepfakes possible, from voice to image to sound to text. And the fact that we now, under the AI Act, creating this obligation for the developers of these tools to actually make the watermarking possible and also impossible to take out if the content is then rolled out in various other platforms by users, there is a guarantee that ultimately the customer would know when interacting, when seeing a video or hearing a song or someone's voice, that that is something that is generated by artificial intelligence, is not something that is authentic. And that is very important. Many people now look at elections, for example, and they see that this is an important risk if that is not done, and they are concerned with the sophistication of the tools that make it possible right now for you and me to appear in a video and look exactly like us, but say anything else other than what we would say. And clearly it does have an impact on the integrity of the information space in the context of election, but not only, because it ultimately it goes to the element of trust. We have to trust, and also we have to be able to make the distinction between truth and non-truth. And that is why these rules on watermarking, on labeling, as you also mentioned earlier, are important, because they can actually bring this trust. So whenever we would be interacting and we would be seeing content that is generated by AI, we can know and we can make the difference. The companies have already started to respond, even if the law is not yet in effect. It's going to take some time before it is going to be implemented, but we see already that some big companies like Adobe and others are already working on the tools to make this watermarking possible. At the beginning they were saying that it's not technically possible, now all of a sudden it is.
Well, yeah,
It's
exactly.
always interesting how the digital world works. And many have announced already they will actually start complying earlier, voluntarily, for the time being. But that means that first, technically it is possible, and two, that the effect of the law is starting to already be felt, even if it is not yet fully into force.
But is the artificial intelligence intelligent enough to copy the watermark, for example? I know I'm joking, but a lot of questions may appear once we start implementing the legislation. Is it enough? Is it, for example, is protecting this legislation the content creators? Is made like this?
Is it enough? I really do not know. I hope it
Nobody
is.
will know.
Nobody knows it. We believe it's future-proof, but I think that there will be a lot of challenges on our road. But at least it is a good start, and the European Unions are pioneer in this field, because I definitely believe, as a socialist myself, I definitely believe that it needed to be regulated. Those systems and those technologies.
Content creators will be protected? Sorry.
No,
Please.
go ahead. No, Dragoș, please.
Content creators will be protected.
They will be protected, and again, it's the first time that we actually recognize, first of all, the challenge that they have to the basic thing of actually knowing whether their work is being absorbed into an algorithm, is being used to train an algorithm or not. Right now, it is impossible to say so. It is impossible right now for a song creator, for an art creator, for a film producer to know whether that work was used in training ChatGPT, for example, or any of the other big models. And there have been attempts to achieve that sort of transparency through contractual means, but even big labels that are hosting and representing titles and authors have not been able to convince tech companies to actually bring that transparency forward, even via a contract. What we're doing with the AI Act is we are making this transparency mandatory. We are requiring the developers of these top models to be transparent about the copyrighted material that they used in training the algorithm. And what that will do is it will bring to the doorstep of the creator the knowledge of knowing that his or her work was used in training the algorithm, and then they can use the copyright legislation, whether here in the EU or in the US or in any other jurisdiction where they happen to be, to then challenge the respective model creators and then seek redress for the fact that their work was used in training the algorithm, or not if they consider that the content is being generated does not resemble their work so well. But again, that transparency that we're now bringing through the AI Act is crucial in protecting creators, and the creative industries have actually demanded, and they are very satisfied with what is now achieved in the AI Act.
I know, Mr. Vitanov, that you've said earlier correctly that the European Parliament and the European Union in general was a pioneer in this area. That's true. Do you think that the rest of the world will follow?
I think the answer is obvious, yes. At some point they will follow. Me and Dragoș were in United States. We came back 2 weeks ago, and we noticed that some of our remarks have been taken into consideration for their certain draft proposals on a state or on a city level, but I think that, speaking about the United States, they're far away from adopting a legislation on a national level. But of course, I think that most of our remarks and most of our conclusions will be adopted. Of course, those discussions have been going on a G7 level or even some other countries. It's just a matter of time.
I remember that at the beginning of the discussion in the European Parliament, Mr. Tudorache, you were also in the US for this subject, exactly because the United States of America does not have any piece of legislation on this, and it was an important debate back then, how to start it, from where to start it, from where to look at this new thing that somehow appeared in our world. Is it possible to see it all over the world? The treatment, let's say, for this artificial intelligence in terms of legislation, in terms of rules, if not exactly legislation?
I'm convinced it will. I share entirely the conclusion of Petar. I think that it is going to be inevitable that other jurisdictions will follow suit, not only because we have done the AI Act and therefore we arrogantly try to impose it on the rest of the world. It's not that. I think first and foremost, societies are going to demand this. And everyone that lives in a democracy will know that when society starts to bring that pressure from down upwards towards the policymakers will have to react. And as we see, and it is evident in every opinion polling that happens in almost all democracies, that society starts to grow concerned about the effects of artificial intelligence on their lives, on their jobs, on the education of their children, and so on and so forth. And therefore, there'll have to be a reaction from the policymakers. And the work that we've done, the fact that we did spend 4 years in working on this text, but we spent 4 years because we really wanted to tackle and approach it from every possible angle. I think the end result is one that will inevitably represent an inspiration for many other jurisdictions. In fact, we've been contacted by parliaments from Latin America, Chile, Paraguay, Peru, Argentina, Asia, literally from all over the world, who are right now working themselves on similar pieces of legislation and that are looking at what we have done as a source of inspiration for their choices. I'm not saying that they will be following entirely the choices that we've made, but they will certainly be taking important elements such as, for example, the risk-based approach. Because I also believe there is no other way to deal with it, because you cannot regulate the technology itself. itself. You'll have to attack.
Exactly, yeah.
You'll have to approach it from a risk perspective because you want to be precise in what you regulate, and you want to regulate those risks because that's what you want to mitigate. And also, there's an important element behind the AI Act, which is the mandate for standards. What we're doing with the regulation, unlike GDPR, for example, where we did not have technical standards, and that represented the challenge for businesses and for enterprises to understand what they were supposed to do. Now we have given this mandate for standards. There are 2 years ahead before the legislation will come into force when technical standards will be available. And I'm convinced that those standards will represent also global standards. And that will also be pushing for this sort of global alignment, not convergence because that is impossible, but at least alignment and interoperability between the different frameworks. And I'm convinced that even in the US, although they traditionally had a much looser approach to regulating technology, but I'm convinced that that thing is coming also because at state level, as Petra was referring, we were together in California 2-3 weeks ago. The state legislator in California is already working on, they already have, I think, 50 bills in preparation, 40-50 bills, and they're trying now to harmonize them into one. And most likely by autumn, they were saying that it's possible that California will act first. And if at state level they will start pushing legislation, I'm also convinced that there will be pressure on the federal level, just like it happened with privacy, to also consider federal legislation as well. So I'm convinced that in a few years' time, even the US might be making the move.
In the end of our discussion, what is your message for those who are watching you?
Well, in terms of AI, I don't have certain message.
The AI will make it.
No, but for those who are watching, of course, we should trust the artificial intelligence, but we should only have the natural intelligence as well. So rely on your national intelligence. Natural, sorry.
And national, because sometimes it's interesting, the combination. Thank you, Peter Vitanov. Dragoș Tudorache, what's your message?
Well, my message is that AI ultimately is a great thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a technology that is literally going to bring so much benefit. It has so much potential, and I think first and foremost we have to look at the bright side of this technology, which, as I said earlier, will be the backbone of our economies for the next decades ahead of us. And now that we have also put the rules in place to make sure that that happens in a way that protects also our rights and our interests as humanity, I think we can look with optimism to the years ahead. Of course, there's enormous work still to be done to adapt our education systems, to prepare our labor markets for that, to reskill our laborers, to be able to work alongside AI. But ultimately, it is a new industrial revolution that can bring prosperity, and I think we have to look at it through those lenses.
Thank you both for the presence and for this discussion.
Thank you.
Vouă celor de acasă vă spun să rămâneți pe Antena 3 CNN. Nu uitați că ne revedem și sâmbătă viitoare la 9:30. Cu bine și sănătoși să fim!